For many years, the cover curse has been etched in the minds of many sports fans. No matter what you watch, the NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB, there is always going to be an athlete daunting the cover of your guys' video game. In some years, their seasons end up spectacular, while in others, they completely fall off a cliff. NASCAR is no exception to this, and over the years, they have a ton of well-known drivers on the cover of their very own gaming product. This has led to some mixed results, but in today's video, we're gonna just talk about the bad. Without further ado, this is the history of the NASCAR cover curse. So let's get into it. Bill Elliott's NASCAR Challenge, a video game released on the Microsoft MS-DOS in 1990, and then later released on the Nintendo Entertainment System in 91. This is kind of interesting because it had two separate release dates on two different consoles in 2 years. This is the very first video game to ever secure the NASCAR license. It was also the first to feature a real-life NASCAR driver in Bill Elliott. Unfortunately, being the sport's first cover athlete had some consequences. 1990 was a very off-season by Bill Elliott's standards. Up to this point, he was viewed as a perennial championship contender, but this season he slipped. In a 2-year span, he went from 4th to 11th in the standings, and unfortunately, the 90 season ended with the tragic passing of one of his crew members. Did you know Kyle Petty had a video game? Well, if not, that's fine because most didn't either. Kyle Petty's No Fear Racing, released on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System in 1995. There were two different versions, an American version and a Japanese version. The Japanese version of the game was released under the title Circuit USA. It was the same game, but the cover just didn't have Kyle Petty's likeness. It's important to note that season, he did in fact get his 8th and final career Cup Series win at Dover. Outside of that win, it was a complete disaster. Only one top 5 coming from that very victory, 5 top 10s, an average finish of 25.6, along with 10 DNFs and a 30th place points finish. Let's get to some console games that most of us know.
EA Sports, it's in the game.
EA Sports, it's in the game.
NASCAR Thunder 2003.
The 6th installment of EA Sports' NASCAR Racing Series was NASCAR Thunder 2003. It was released on September 19th for the Xbox and September 29th for the PlayStation 2. On the cover was none other than NASCAR's most popular driver up to that point, Dale Earnhardt Jr. The first 9 races were a complete roller coaster. Finishes outside the top 15 to start off the season at Daytona, Rockingham, and Vegas were the story. But from the 4th race at Atlanta to the 9th race at Talladega, he was able to mount a charge all the way from 25th to 5th in the standings. Quickly as the season got rolling, everything got back on track up until his violent wreck at Fontana. We all know now that this hit to the wall gave Jr. one of his first concussions in the Cup Series, but at the time, nobody knew. The only person to know of any of these symptoms was Dale Jr. himself. And for about a month and a half, he kept this hidden from his competitors, his family, and the sanctioning body as a whole. Essentially, he wasn't the same driver after that hit and fell as low as 17th in the standings come summertime. This ended his title hopes really quick, and by the time Kansas rolled around in the fall, he straight up told USA Today that he had raced several weeks with a concussion. The reaction in the garage and to fans was not only filled with shock, but also disappointment.
This change comes on the heels of a story in USA Today and an Associated Press story in which Dale Earnhardt Jr. said he drove for several races with a severe concussion after this crash at California on April 28th. Earnhardt was not hospitalized after the crash and under NASCAR's old policy was eligible to race the following week. Now Earnhardt says for several weeks his reactions were slowed, that he had trouble telling the team what the car was doing.
Are you disappointed in Dale Earnhardt Jr.?
Yeah, that's fair to say. Yes, I am. I think in today's environment that the competitors on the racetrack should share in the desire for everybody that they're competing against to be right.
EA Sports, it's in the game.
I'm Bill Weber. I'm in the game.
NASCAR 2005, Chase for the Cup.
NASCAR 2005 Chase for the Cup, the 8th installment by EA Sports. The career mode in this game changed drastically compared to its predecessors. The Thunder series had a basic, you own a team, you have to build it from the ground up for 20 seasons in order to compete for championships. But NASCAR 2005 took it to a whole nother level. You immediately got to race Ryan Newman, who for some reason has your number and decides to call you after beating him to offer you his modified ride. That's great for us because the game is going to be a whole lot funner to play, but as for its cover driver, that's another story. Kevin Harvick was selected as that season's cover driver, and at first was looking like a Chase favorite. But unfortunately, his antics on the track kept overshadowing his success. Up to this point, Harvick was known as a bit of a hothead, but he took it to the next level in 04. Run-ins with Kenseth and Kane caused a lot of buzz around the sport, and to make matters worse, towards the end of the season at Bristol, competing for a chase spot, he has one of the most bizarre sequence of events happen to him during it.
When there's long green flag laps on this track, Alan, it can wear you out physically. Kevin Harvick's arms are asleep. He's looking for a backup driver, so anybody that, he almost has a wreck in front of him to get the caution, but he's looking for a backup driver right now because he cannot operate his vehicle correctly.
The next caution after that report, they immediately pull him out, and he's replaced by former cover athlete Kyle Petty. In the end, Harvick wouldn't end up making the chase, and to add insult to injury, he lost a total of 7 spots. Now that is an epic collapse.
EA Sports. It's in the game.
The 9th installment of the series, NASCAR 06 Total Team Control. Now you're probably wondering, wait a minute, there's 2 drivers on here, so who gets the cover curse? Well, let me explain. When you first get the game, you have to play this prologue story where Johnson and Gordon have to beat the DEI tandem of Michael Waltrip and Dale Earnhardt Jr. in that season's Pepsi 400. It's kind of unrealistic to me as Gordon's taking the lead while Johnson's helping him. The fans go nuts. I can tell you right away, in 2005, when Gordon was taking the lead from Jr., that was not happening at all. Anyways, Johnson ends up drifting in front of Mikey ends up turning him, Johnson ends up in the wall, flips on his side, and you have to use the swap feature in order to get the win for not only Jeff Gordon, but Hendrick Motorsports. Essentially, you're taking one for the team. Since Johnson took one for the team in the prologue, the game cover curse automatically goes to Jeff Gordon. Johnson's celebrating on the inside because he knows what's up. The 2005 season began in typical Jeff Gordon fashion, 3 wins in the first 9 races, but come summertime, he was dipping performance-wise. A ton of mistakes, wrecks, and mechanical failures became the new norm, and by the time the chase rolled around, Jeff Gordon was the biggest guy on the outside looking in.
People ask me, do I see things flash before my eyes during a crash? I tell them, it's pretty much blurred streaks of metal, asphalt, grass, rubber, smoke. Oh, and those guys in fireproof suits.
And people ask me all the time, how in the hell did Elliott Sadler get on a game cover? The 10th edition NASCAR 07 is amazing, and I'm not really going to talk about the game. I'm just going to leave the link to Kamikaze Games video in the description. It is a very detailed review video. Go check it out after this video's done. On this one, I'm just gonna focus solely on the cover driver. Don't get me wrong, Elliott Sadler, 3 career Cup Series victories, made the inaugural Chase for the Cup in 2004, a very good Xfinity driver competing for championships. It's not necessarily a knock on him, but a knock on EA Sports themselves. I don't know what the selection process was for this particular game, but I don't think it was very thought out. Elliott Sadler was bad in 2006. It was a combination of him racing way past his prime and the mismanagement of Robert Yates Racing. How bad? Well, bad enough that by the time the game is released to the public, he's already with a brand new team. EA Sports probably realized they made a huge mistake, and it turned out to be a marketing disaster. Well, here we go again. NASCAR 09, the final installment by EA Sports. This is a very underwhelming game. There's no manufacturer recognition whatsoever. The PS2 version was just straight up awful. Game mode features on the PS3 edition lack to its predecessors. Jeff Gordon is once again back on the cover, so you know what time it is. It's time for the curse. 2008 on paper looks like another good season, but by Jeff Gordon's standards, he was extremely off. The back problems caused at the Vegas incident didn't help his case, and even though he made that season's chase for the Cup, he seemed to be a shell of his former self compared to 2007.
Mike Joy with Darrell Waltrip live from Charlotte Motor Speedway. DW, I don't know if I've ever seen a race like this.
This has got to be a record for lead change.
Final lap, it's Tony Stewart in the lead.
Johnson jumps out front.
Now it's Almirola.
Danica Patrick around the pack.
It's Trevor Bayne.
What a move by Tony Stewart.
Boyer to the point.
Bush around the pack.
Landon Castle.
Kane to the
Here
point.
comes Labonte.
Logano.
On the line, it's going to be the closest finish ever.
If you're gonna do a cover vote, you already know damn well that Dale Earnhardt Jr. is gonna win. Lights out. That's what NASCAR The Game Inside Line did in 2012 when in a cover vote, Dale Earnhardt Jr. won by a landslide. Almost 10 years after his last cover appearance, Dale Earnhardt Jr. enters the 2012 season as a championship favorite again. He starts off the season strong, finally breaking that long-awaited winless streak, but then it was the exact same. He goes from great to good, and then in the end, he is forced to sit out because of concussion issues. If any other publishing company is thinking of ever putting Dale Earnhardt Jr. on the game again, hear me out. Don't do it, he always ends up hurt.
Dale sat out the next 2 races to allow his head to heal, but in doing so, he finished last in the chase.
For NASCAR 14 Bayou Technics, Tony Stewart was on the cover, but I'm not gonna touch this one. Most of us diehard fans already know what happened that year. It was a combination of bad performance on the track followed by some tragedy off of it. I feel because of the circumstances that took place, it wouldn't be good to go in full detail, but because he was on the cover that year, I have to address it for a moment. And finally, the worst NASCAR game of all time, NASCAR Heat Evolution. Unfortunately, Carl Edwards had to be the cover driver on this terrible game, and look what happened. The worst of the worst. He loses the championship and ends up retiring. If you're not convinced it's the worst game in NASCAR history, this should confirm it. And once again, that'll do it for another video. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is Black Lives Matter. Catch you next time.